Imagine being fired, not for stealing or showing up late, but for feeding a hungry veteran. That's exactly what happened to Emily Jacobs. But what happened next? 4 Marines stormed the cafe, and everything changed forever. Stay with me because this story will restore your faith in kindness.
Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. You're fired. Those were the last words Emily Jacobs expected to hear as she untied her apron after a long shift at Millstone Café. For 3 years, Emily had worked at the small-town diner nestled off Route 19. She was the heart of the place. Always smiling, always hustling, always remembering regular customers' favorite orders, even if they hadn't been in for months. But more than anything, Emily had a rule she lived by. Treat people like family, especially the ones who need it the most. It was a cold Wednesday afternoon when everything changed. Just past 3 p.m., the door creaked open. In walked an elderly man, hunched over, dressed in a faded army jacket with an old wooden cane tapping against the floor. He looked tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. His eyes held decades of weight. His boots were scuffed, the soles uneven, and in his trembling hands he clutched a small, worn-out photograph of a woman smiling next to him, perhaps his late wife. Emily spotted him right away. She walked over with the same warmth she gave everyone. "Hi there, sir. Table for one?" she asked, kneeling a bit to meet his eyes. He nodded gently and whispered, "Just a glass of water, miss. I'm not hungry." Emily froze for a moment. She'd heard that line before. It was something people said when their wallet was emptier than their stomach. Something about the way he held that photo and sat so quietly. It struck her deep. "Of course," she said softly. "Take your time, I'll be right back." She walked over to the kitchen pass where the head cook Joe looked up. "What's up?" he asked. Emily glanced back at the old man. "Can you make me the roast beef plate? Add mashed potatoes, gravy, and if there's apple pie left, cut him a slice?" Joe raised an eyebrow. "You know he's not paying, right?" Emily pulled her wallet from her apron pocket. Inside were the crumpled tips from her morning shift. She peeled off a $20 and handed it over. "Doesn't matter, I'll cover it." Minutes later, Emily carried out the hot plate and placed it in front of the man. "I didn't order this," he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "It's on the house," she replied. "Roast beef just like my grandpa used to love." And the arao. Man stared at the plate, his hands shaking slightly. After a pause, he looked up at her, tears starting to well in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "I haven't had a warm meal in days." Emily smiled, gently placing a napkin beside him. "Enjoy it, sir, and take your time." For the next 20 minutes, Emily worked her other tables while keeping an eye on the veteran. He ate slowly, savoring every bite like it was a Thanksgiving feast. He kept glancing at the photo in his hand, whispering something under his breath. But then, trouble walked out of the office. Mr. Hawkins, the cafe's manager, had been watching from the back. He marched over, his expression already sour. "What is this?" he snapped, pointing at the man's plate. Emily turned around calmly. "I gave him a meal. He's a veteran. He hasn't eaten in days. I paid for it with my tips." "You gave him a $15 meal?" Hawkins barked. "Without checking with me first?" Emily held her ground. "It's not about the money. The man served this country. He deserved better than a glass of water." Hawkins shook his head in disbelief. "That's not your call, Emily. We're not a charity. We have rules here. You give away free meals, you make us look weak. Other people see that, they'll expect the same." Emily took a breath, trying to stay calm. "If that's how you see it, then maybe this isn't the place for me." Mr. Hawkins crossed his arms. "You're right, it's not." And just like that, he delivered the blow. "You're fired." The diner fell silent. A couple nearby gasped. Even Joe poked his head out of the kitchen, stunned. Emily's jaw clenched, but she didn't cry. She looked back at the old man, Frank, she later learned, and saw the disbelief on his face. She untied her apron, folded it slowly, and placed it on the counter. Before leaving, she walked over to Frank one last time. Take care of yourself, okay? She said, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. He reached up and held her hand for a moment as if it was the first kindness he'd been shown in years. Thank you, Emily, he said softly. She smiled and walked out the door. But that wasn't the end. What neither Emily nor Mr. Hawkins knew was that a woman sitting in the corner booth had filmed the whole interaction on her phone. From the moment Emily served Frank the food to the second Hawkins fired her, it was all captured. That night, she posted the video online with the caption, "Waitress fired for feeding a hungry veteran. This world is broken." Within hours, the video exploded. Over 2 million views, 100,000 shares, thousands of comments. People around the country were outraged, not just for Emily, but for Frank. The next morning, Emily woke up to messages from strangers calling her a hero. Reporters wanted interviews, veterans groups were reaching out, donations started pouring in, and within just a few days, 4 U.S. Marines would show up at Millstone Café to send a message the entire country would hear. But that's another chapter in Emily's story. This was the day she lost her job, for doing the right thing, and in losing it, she started something much bigger. Emily left the cafe with tears in her eyes, not from losing her job, but from something far worse. In her heart, she kept asking the same question over and over. How did we become a world where compassion is punished? All she had done was show kindness to an old man who hadn't had a warm meal in days. She didn't expect praise. She didn't want attention. She simply wanted to do what felt right. But outside that cafe, a storm was already brewing. Unbeknownst to Emily, a woman sitting at the far end of the diner had witnessed the entire scene, from the moment Frank walked in with his tattered coat, to Emily quietly sliding him a hot plate, and finally to Mr. Hawkins shouting across the cafe and firing her on the spot. That woman, Rachel Mendez, had instinctively pulled out her phone and recorded the scene. She didn't know what would come of it, but something about the moment felt too important to keep to herself. That night, she uploaded the video to TikTok and Twitter with the caption, "She got fired for feeding a veteran. What kind of world are we living in?" Justice for Emily. The video caught fire almost instantly. The internet reacts. She's the hero we need. Within 24 hours, the video had surpassed 2 million views on TikTok and even more on Twitter and Facebook. The clip was just under 2 minutes long, but that was all it took. It showed Frank sitting silently, the wrinkles on his face deepened by years of pain. It showed Emily placing a steaming hot plate of food in front of him, kneeling down to make sure he was okay. It showed her wiping tears from her eyes as he whispered, "Thank you." And then came the moment that enraged millions. Mr. Hawkins, red-faced, yelling across the counter, "You're fired!" The comments came pouring in. By the thousands, she did what any human being should do. This man fought for our freedom, and that manager threw his dignity in the trash. Where's the cafe owner? We want answers. We want justice. The hashtags, Justice for Emily, Veteran Deserves Better, and Feed with Love began trending nationwide. Local news outlets picked it up first, then it hit national media. Morning shows talked about it. Podcasters debated it. Celebrities reposted the clip, calling it a reminder that kindness should never cost you your job. Even retired military generals commented in support, saying, "Emily Jacobs has more honor in her heart than some people will show in a lifetime." From anonymous waitress to national symbol, Emily had never used social media much. Her Instagram was mostly pictures of her dog and books. Her Twitter had 12 followers. But overnight, she became a national figure. Reporters showed up at her doorstep. Strangers sent her flowers. Veterans across the country reached out to thank her for what she did. "I didn't expect any of this," she told a local station. "I just couldn't watch someone sit hungry and walk away." One clip from her interview spread nearly as fast as the original video. "I didn't do it for praise. I did it because my grandfather taught me that no man who served this country should ever go to bed hungry." People were moved, deeply, and then came the offers. Job offers, donations, and a new path. Local restaurants offered Emily a job the same week. One bakery said she could start immediately, with full benefits and a raise. A woman in New York started a GoFundMe titled, "Help. Emily Keeps Spreading Kindness." Within 5 days, it raised over $85,000. Another GoFundMe was created for Frank Wallace, the veteran she helped, once his name was shared by family friends. His fundraiser crossed $150,000 in just 2 weeks. Emily didn't stop there. She used part of her donations to set up a weekly meal drive for homeless veterans in her town, partnering with shelters and local volunteers. She called it Emily's Table, because no hero should go hungry. Her story was no longer just about one meal. It had become a movement. Meanwhile, at Millstone Café, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The cafe's Google reviews were bombarded with angry 1-star ratings. Commenters wrote, "Never eating here again. Shameful. Firing a woman for feeding a vet? Disgusting. Hope the new owners have better values." Mr. Hawkins tried to issue a statement calling it a misunderstanding of policy, but no one bought it. Protesters stood outside the cafe with signs that read, "Bring Emily back and feed, don't fire." Within 10 days, the cafe announced a temporary closure due to the backlash. Mr. Hawkins was nowhere to be found. The moment that changed everything, Emily Jacobs never thought giving someone a plate of food would change her life. She didn't do it for attention. She didn't know someone was filming. She just followed her heart, but in doing so, she reminded an entire country of something it had forgotten. Kindness matters. It may not follow policy. It may not fit on a spreadsheet, but it saves people. It heals people. It inspires people. 1. Act of compassion reached millions, and as we'll soon see in the next part of her journey, 4 U.S. Marines were watching too, and they weren't about to stay silent. 3 days after the video went viral, something happened that no one at Millstone Café saw coming. It was just after 11 a.m. on a chilly Saturday when a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the cafe. Business had been slow since the video hit the internet. The once bustling diner was now half empty. The staff looked uneasy. Customers whispered. And Mr. Hawkins, the manager who had fired Emily, had bags under his eyes from days of bad press and online backlash. Then the cafe door swung open. 4 U.S. Marines in full dress uniform stepped inside. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. You could hear a pin drop. Boots echoed on the tiled floor as the Marines walked in with purpose. They weren't there for pancakes, and they definitely weren't there for coffee. Leading the group was Sergeant Marcus Ray, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a sharp jawline and medals on his chest. His presence alone silenced the entire room. He scanned the cafe, then locked eyes on Mr. Hawkins behind the counter. "Are you the manager?" he asked, his voice deep and commanding. Mr. Hawkins turned pale. Yes. I'm the manager. Can I help you?" Sergeant Ray stepped forward. Is this the place where an 84-year-old veteran was denied dignity, and the young lady who helped him was punished for it? Mr. Hawkins swallowed hard. He fumbled for words. I was just following policy. It was a misunderstanding. We have rules about... Before he could finish, one of the other Marines stepped in. "Your policy's broken, sir." His tone was sharp, but not aggressive. It didn't need to be. The uniform said everything. They weren't there to argue. They weren't there to fight. But their message was crystal clear. Honor isn't optional, and disrespect doesn't go unnoticed. The Marines speak for the nation. Sergeant Ray turned and addressed the room. "We came here today because we saw a video that broke our hearts and lit a fire in our souls. A fellow veteran, a man who served this country, sat in this very room hungry, and the only person who did something about it was punished." People in the cafe nodded silently. A few had tears in their eyes. "We're not here to shout," he continued. "We're here to stand for what's right. Emily Jacobs showed more courage and honor in one act than some people show in a lifetime, and we'd like to speak with her, and with the man she helped." Mr. Hawkins, visibly sweating now, muttered, "Emily doesn't work here anymore. And the old man, he hasn't been back." Sergeant Ray pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to him. "When they return, and they will, We want them to know something. The Marines have their back. He placed the card on the counter like a final word. Then, just as quickly as they had arrived, the Marines turned and walked out. But their message stayed behind like thunder in the air. Emily and Frank. Get the message later that afternoon. The video of the Marines inside the cafe hit social media. Another customer had filmed it, and within hours it exploded across the internet. Marines visit cafe to defend waitress who fed veteran. Sergeant Ray speaks truth in viral moment of justice. Emily, still overwhelmed by the attention, was at home when she saw the video. Her hands trembled. She couldn't believe what she was watching. They had come, not to her doorstep, but to the place where she had stood alone, and stood for her. Tears streamed down her face as she read the top comment. Real heroes defending a quiet hero. This is what America should look like. She called Frank immediately. Did you see this? She asked. Frank chuckled softly. I did. I never thought I'd live to see Marines walk into a diner for me. Guess I'm not as forgotten as I thought. Emily's voice cracked. You're not. None of you are. An invitation they couldn't ignore. 2 days later, Emily received an unexpected email. It was from Sergeant Ray himself. He thanked her for her courage and compassion, and asked if she and Frank would join them at a Veterans Benefit dinner hosted by the Marine Corps Foundation. We want to honor you both, he wrote. Not just for what you did, but for reminding us why we wear the uniform. Emily accepted. So did Frank. When they arrived at the banquet hall that weekend, hundreds stood and applauded. Emily received a Community Hero Award, and Frank was presented with a plaque that read, "For service beyond the battlefield," and "For reminding us all that honor never ages." The cafe would never be the same back at Millstone Cafe. The fallout continued. Facing massive public pressure, the owners finally stepped in. Mr. Hawkins was fired for his actions. A public apology was issued to both Emily and Frank, and soon after, the cafe was reopened under new management, with a new policy taped to the front door. In this place, no veteran goes hungry, ever. They called it Emily's policy. One meal, one moment, one message. It started with a meal. It turned into a movement. Emily Jacobs didn't ask for fame. She didn't plan to make headlines. She just saw a hungry man and did what any decent person should do. But the world noticed. The Marines noticed. And together they reminded everyone of a powerful truth. Kindness is not weakness, it is courage. And sometimes all it takes is one act of compassion to feed the soul of a nation. The moment they returned, and changed Emily's life forever. It was a bright Monday morning when the cafe that once felt like a place of shame became a stage for something unforgettable. Millstone Cafe was packed, not because of a breakfast rush, but because word had spread like wildfire. The Marines were coming back. This time they weren't alone. Through connections in the veteran community and a bit of detective work, Sergeant Marcus Ray and his fellow Marines tracked down Frank Wallace. The 84-year-old Korean War veteran Emily had fed. Frank had gone quiet after the story went viral. He didn't want the spotlight. He wasn't used to people fussing over him. But when Sergeant Ray called and told him, "This time, it's not about what you owe us. It's about what we owe you," Frank agreed to come, and so, just before noon, the same black SUV returned. Only now, Frank was inside. Honor, not rejection. When Frank stepped out wearing a clean suit and his old service cap, the cafe went silent. Conversations stopped. Phones came out. People stood. 4 Marines walked in with him, each in full dress uniform. Frank looked around, eyes wide. "This place looks smaller when you're not hungry," he said with a smile. Then Sergeant Ray gently helped him up to the center of the cafe. He turned to the crowd and said, "This man served his country before most of us were even born. He gave so others could live free. And when he needed help, only one person stood up for him. But today we stand up for him." The Marines all stood at attention, then raised their hands in salute. "Sir, your service will never be forgotten. You deserve Respect, not rejection. Frank's hands trembled. He choked up. His cane leaned against a table as he wiped away tears. The cafe erupted in applause. Some people clapped with tears in their eyes. Others simply stood in silence, deeply moved. And then Sergeant Ray said something that made the moment even more powerful. But we're not just here for Frank today. We're also here for Emily Jacobs. A salute to kindness. Emily had been sitting quietly near the back, invited but uncertain. She didn't want attention. She wasn't sure what this was all about. But when she heard her name, she slowly stood up. The Marines motioned her forward, and as she approached, something happened that no one expected. The entire cafe stood and clapped. People who had never met her hugged her as she passed. One older woman whispered, "You reminded us what love looks like." Emily reached the front, eyes wide, hands trembling. That's when Sergeant Ray presented her with a framed letter of appreciation, wrapped in a navy blue case with gold trim. It was signed by senior officers from their unit, and it read, "In a world where apathy often wins, you chose compassion. For that we thank you. You did not wear a uniform, but you served humanity. You honored a veteran when others turned away. You reminded us what courage looks like off the battlefield." Emily couldn't speak. She held the frame close to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. And just when she thought it was over, Sergeant Ray pulled something else from his jacket. The envelope that changed everything. He held up a white envelope and said, "Emily, we heard about more than just what you did for Frank. We heard about who you are, about your dream of becoming a nurse." Emily looked confused. "We also heard you've been struggling to pay for school," Sergeant Ray continued. "Veterans and their families across the country came together and decided to help." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. The cafe gasped. Emily covered her mouth. "No, I can't accept this." Sergeant Ray gently touched her shoulder. "Yes, you can. Because when the world needed a little more kindness, you didn't hesitate. And now, it's our turn." The check was part of a national fundraiser. Donations sent in by retired service members, military families, and even strangers who had seen the video and wanted to help Emily chase her dream of becoming a nurse. A community transformed. That afternoon, the cafe felt transformed. People stayed long after the event ended. Veterans who had quietly watched from the corners came up to thank Emily. Parents introduced their kids to Frank, telling them, "This man is a hero. Remember his face." Frank, overwhelmed by it all, simply said, "I came here as a nobody, and I'm leaving feeling like somebody." Emily hugged him tight. The owner of the cafe, who had since replaced Mr. Hawkins, declared that a plaque would be hung on the wall with a photo of Emily and Frank and the words, "Kindness served here." In honor of Emily Jacobs and Frank Wallace, what started as a firing ended in a future. What began as the cruel firing of a kind waitress became something no one could have predicted. Emily Jacobs, a young woman with a big heart and a quiet voice, had sparked a national conversation. She was no longer just a former waitress. She was now a symbol of what's possible when we choose compassion over rules, humanity over policy. With the help of the Marines, she was now enrolled in nursing school with no debt. And with a support system stronger than ever, Frank Wallace was no longer alone. He had been embraced by a grateful nation and finally given the dignity he had always deserved. And the cafe that once punished kindness became a place known for it. One act of compassion, one meal, one young woman who decided to care. And that, as the Marines would say, made all the difference. The girl who fed a veteran and ended up changing lives, Emily Jacobs, didn't wake up expecting to change the world. But within weeks of that one small act of kindness, her life would be almost unrecognizable. After the video of her feeding 84-year-old veteran Frank Wallace went viral, and after the Marines honored her publicly, everything changed. An outpouring of support calls came flooding in. Local restaurants and diners reached out offering Emily jobs, some even management positions. One cafe owner told the press, "We'd be lucky to have someone with her heart. That's the kind of person I want, representing my business." But it wasn't just job offers. Emily also got a call from a national veterans charity, asking if she would consider becoming their official spokesperson for community outreach. She was stunned. Me. I'm not a speaker. She laughed nervously. But, the organization insisted. You spoke the loudest when no one else did. You acted. That's all the inspiration people need. Even Frank Wallace's life took a dramatic turn. A kind stranger started a GoFundMe page for him with a simple message. No veteran should ever go hungry again. It took just 2 weeks for the page to raise over $100,000. Frank, speechless when told the amount, tried to protest. That's too much. I don't need all that, he said. But Emily, now his close friend, gently placed her hand on his. Frank, this isn't charity. This is gratitude for everything you gave. The funds allowed Frank to move out of a tiny, rundown apartment into a cozy home in a senior community. He received proper medical care, warm meals daily, and, perhaps, most important, a sense of dignity restored. The cafe that learned a hard lesson, and what of Millstone Cafe, where it all began? The place had once been a community favorite, but after firing Emily for feeding Frank, it faced a wave of public backlash like never before. Online reviews tanked. Ratings plummeted. Fires employees for kindness, never coming back. Support. Emily, not this place. Treat people better or shut your doors. In just a matter of weeks, thousands of one-star reviews flooded Yelp, Google, and every major platform. Feeling the pressure and facing protests outside the door, Mr. Hawkins, the manager, quietly stepped down. No press release, no apology. Just a silent exit from a storm he created. But something unexpected happened next. The cafe was purchased by new owners, a group of local veterans who had watched the saga unfold. Their first order of business? They publicly invited Emily to return, not just as a waitress, but as a manager with a generous raise and full benefits. Emily smiled, touched but firm. I'm honored, she said, but I'm walking a new path now. A new mission is born. With the help of friends, supporters, and a portion of her donation from the Marines and other well-wishers, Emily launched her own nonprofit. She called it A Warm Meal, A Warm Heart. Its mission? To provide free meals and support to homeless veterans and low-income seniors across the country. What began with one hot plate of roast beef and mashed potatoes became a movement that would feed thousands. Emily's nonprofit partnered with shelters, churches, local diners, and veteran homes. Every Saturday, volunteers would cook, package, and distribute meals with notes that read, "You matter. You are not forgotten." Frank became the official face of the organization. He wore a new cap that read, "Founding Inspiration," and loved to greet volunteers, sometimes giving short speeches. This young lady saved me with kindness, he told a crowd during one food drive. Now she's saving others. The ripple effect Emily's story inspired more than just donations. It sparked copycat kindness. In Kansas, a waitress bought lunch for a homeless vet after hearing Emily's story. The restaurant later covered her tuition. In New York, a 5th grade class wrote letters to local veterans and collected canned food for shelters. In Texas, a retired soldier used his truck to deliver food for a warm meal, a warm heart. Every week, Emily's story had started a national ripple effect, not from a place of anger or protest, but from love in action. What she told the world, when asked by a local news reporter how she felt about all the fame and attention, Emily shook her head. I didn't do anything special, she said softly. I just treated someone the way they deserved to be treated, and somehow that was enough to change everything. She paused, thinking. The world doesn't need superheroes. It just needs more people who care. And so, her story, continues Emily. Jacobs, once a quiet young waitress trying to put herself through nursing school, was now a national symbol of compassion. Her nonprofit grew every month. More volunteers joined. More cities reached out. Veterans from coast to coast sent her thank you. Letters. Frank, now healthy and thriving, remained by her side. And that little cafe where it all began? Now under new leadership, it had become a community hub, serving free meals to veterans every Monday, a new tradition the owners called Emily's Mondays. On the wall near the counter, in a wooden frame, hung a photo of Emily and Frank hugging. Below it, a simple quote: "One meal can feed more than a stomach, it can feed a soul." She was fired for feeding a veteran, but in the end she fed a movement, and the world was better for it. Kindness is free, but sometimes it changes the world. Emily lost her job, but she gained a purpose. One act of compassion lit a fire that rallied millions, and 4 brave Marines made sure the world didn't forget. If this story moved you, don't scroll away. Share it. Speak up. Do something good today. You never know who it might save.